Hi everyone, it's time for the Strix 1070 Ti review. Right, okay, so we're actually here for the review of the Strix. If you've not seen it already, I have got a review up on the channel, same day, same time, of the Founders Edition as well, but the Strix turned up just in time, so I managed to get some stuff done on it. Now, essentially, with the Strix, I just like the Founders, I don't need to spend a lot of time on it. It's a Strix card. If we want to get technical about it, the fins here are 40% bigger than they were with the original 1070 and the original 1080. This is basically the 1080 Ti cooler. You get the RGB on the logo on the back, RGB down the side, and then the little RGB bits down the front of the card. It's got, the rest of it is pretty much exactly the same as you would have expected if you were to have one of the original 1080s or 1070s in your hand. 8-pin here, and the long and short of it is, it's $499. Now the original Founders is $419, or they're the prices I've been given before launch. I obviously can't really check around too much at the moment. So we're going to delve into the testing. Temperature testing, it made a massive difference. 60 degrees as an absolute top end temperature. Now that was after looping Unigine in 4K and 8 times anti-aliasing, as I have done with all of the other results in there. They're tested in the exact same way. So 60 degrees is, I mean, not being funny, that was the temperatures that we were getting on a 1060 Strix. So yeah, it's a bit nuts. Now this is the clock speed thing. So with the clock speed, what you need to realise is NVIDIA don't really want the board manufacturers putting base clock, overclocks, all that sort of stuff on it. So when it comes running exactly the same as the 1070 reference. What you have to do is install the GPU Boost software, GPU Tweak. It's the Asus GPU Tweak software. Click overclock mode, and then that's how I've done my testing for all of the results. So all of the results are in the overclock mode, but I did put a cheeky manual overclock on it just to see what I could do. So when we know that this graph next to me, that one, when we know that graph, the Asus would have been exactly the same as the NVIDIA one. So the one above, that's the manual overclock. And if you want to put a bit of a cheeky overclock on, it does make your life quite easy. Just remember that if you keep going and you think it's stable, you need to do a benchmark run every time you increase your overclock, because you can overclock it too far and the scores will fall, but it will still be stable. You'll be able to play all your games, most of the benchmarks, every benchmark I tried I could, but the scores did tail off. But I must admit, I could, on the GPU Boost software, GPU Tweak software that I had, pretty much, well, I could get it to the end and it would be stable, but the scores dropped off. So literally I moved the slider to the end and it was like over 2000 megahertz, like even more. I think I had another 50 megahertz extra on this, but it had to tail it back. And believe it or not, like I said, I brought the clock back and then my average scores came up, and the average is what we want. Peak means nothing. Always hearing people going, oh, I've overclocked my 1080 Ti to 2100 megahertz. Yeah, it's probably running worse than your mate that's got his running at 2000 on your averages, because that's where the key is. So there are your scores there. You can see it's responded fairly well. I mean, you're looking at like 150 points on your average clock on that one. And literally all I did was move the power slider to 120% and then kept moving the overclock slider up until, like I said, I saw those scores drop. Then you knock the clock back that little bit, and then you've got your one there. Now the only one that I've got a score for the overclock mode, manual, so the overclock button mode, and then the manual overclock is this one, which is the 3D Mark one. And I know the camera does look a bit kind of high today, doesn't it? Let's put it down a little bit, see if it makes any difference. I'll stand a bit closer, that would be easier. Yeah. Anyway, so the blue one is the OC mode. The green one is the manual overclock. Technically, if I was going to do the manual overclock and do an entirely new run on that, it would take me over a day to be able to get it finished. So it's just not something, with the shortness of the NDA, I just didn't have time. So that was just to give you an idea of what's going on. Hitman, it scored pretty well. Don't forget, this is not the manual overclock in this. This is literally just install GPU, tweak, and then hit OC mode. It's a little nudge up, but it's not anything massive. So that one did really well, but then because it is a bit of a mixed bag, if you put it on DSX, let's face it, the RX 56 Unbalanced was scoring better. So it is a bit woo. Now the 499 on the Strix, you're gonna have to kind of make some peace with, because that's 1080 territory, but it's basic 1080 territory, depending on, you know, where you're looking for prices and stuff. So you need to decide, do you want performance, or do you want something that's cooler, easier to live with, you know, a few more better features on it, that sort of thing. Now I would say the 1070 Ti is going to be a little bit, it is cheaper than the 1080, but once you get up to that actual, like comparing the 1080 territory, you do open yourself up to, you can obviously get cheaper 1080s. And by cheaper, I mean, so cheaper in the 1080 range rather than something like a £600 Strix. But this is, let's face it, about 100 quid at least cheaper than the 1080 Strix. So you're gonna have to decide where you want to go, because at the end of the day, there's going to be people out there amongst you that are going to be screaming at me that I'm just going to go and buy the cheapest 1080 that I can, and then I'm going to live with that, and that's fine. That's there for you. But at the end of the day, this is there. It's cheaper than the Asus Strix 1080. It goes quite well, if I'm honest. The temperatures are amazing. It's really easy to live with. Let's face it, if you've got that in your rig, there's not many people out there that are not going to know that you've got a 1080. Well, some people might think you've got a 1070 Ti. Some people might think you've got a 1080 Ti because they look so similar. It's a really weird one to review because only you can decide, really, and it really depends where your loyalties lie. For £500, it's quite clearly a good card, performs well, it's cool, it's calm, it's collected, it ticks all of the boxes. So yeah, just let me know underneath whether A, this is the sort of thing you would buy, whether you would save up for a little bit longer and buy the 1080 Strix instead. To be honest with you though, by the time that you've saved up and got a 1080 Strix, you then get to the point where you could save up for the same amount of time again, and then you'd almost have enough money for a 1080 Ti. So there's that never-ending kind of spiral. At the end of the day, Nvidia have kind of taken a gap that big, made it that big, and then chucks a card in between. And it does fit perfectly in between in price, performance. But let's face it, peeps, Nvidia didn't really want you to overclock it, because when you overclock these cards, it does narrow down the 1080 that little bit more. So there is part of me that thinks, not an overclocking card like this, but a card like this with a decent cooler that you can overclock on, keep your temps down, keep your noise down. I'd almost say that this is got such validity over a cheaper 1080, and by a cheaper 1080, I don't mean less money than this. I mean less money than the other kind of higher end 1080s. So the 1080 is going to be more money than this, but you save this, you get all the better cooler and stuff, but the 1080 that costs more money is going to end up with a worse cooler and stuff. That's where I'm trying to go with it. So let me know, what would you do? Would you have a substandard or a lower end 1080 and pay more? Or would you have an amazing 1070 Ti and pay less? You tell me in the comments underneath. I'm going to read every single one of them.